Being a technology reporter is more than just trying out the latest gadget or snazzy new device. We caught up with Bill Thompson, studio tech expert on Click, the technology radio programme from the BBC World Service, for some advice on how aspiring tech reporters can succeed within the digital age.
There is no such thing as a digital native, and young people today who are going into journalism who are using technology are not necessarily at all equipped to explain it. And that is a very good thing if you're a journalist who wants to explain it, because it means there is space for you. The people around you who are Snapchatting and on Facebook and doing all of those things need it to be explained to them as well. They need to understand the implications of what they're doing for the structure of their social lives. They need to understand the privacy policies. They need to understand the companies that are building and deploying these technologies. They need to be able to challenge the surveillance model that underpins almost every online offering and almost every app that sits on your delightful phone on the desk in front of us. So there is a massive role for real journalism. It's just that when I started, a lot of it was just explaining what the technology was, because very few people had seen it, and it was starting to affect their lives when it was relatively hidden. Now the technology is everywhere, and the real role for a journalist is finding a way to explain why it matters and how you might manage it, how you might deal with it. So it's a different thing that is being asked of journalism, but it's still absolutely a role for journalists, and it's not something everybody can do. If you're a journalist, as in if you are used to figuring out what question to ask, asking it, researching, looking at sources, evaluating, and in particular communicating a message where you do your best to give every side of an argument its strongest case, so if you're a good journalist, applying that to technology is just about learning about the technology and then doing the things you do as a journalist. So it is about finding sources you trust. Now that may be, newspapers and magazines where there are people writing who you think they know what they're doing. It may be going to companies and developing relationships with those companies and organisations that you find of interest and getting sources internally. It's reading. A lot of time and energy is spent analysing the tech sector, and those reports are published by people like the OECD and the United Nations and within the UK sort of government departments. There's a lot of stuff out there. So it's a matter about taking the beat seriously, getting your head inside it and figuring out what it means. I would say the one thing that will distinguish you, though, is making a real effort to understand the technology itself, not just the way it is presented. So actually bother to learn to code. Not so that you can be a programmer, but so that when you talk to programmers, you know what they're talking about. It's no different to learning the vocabulary of any area that you might be interested in. If you were going to go and become a restaurant critic, you need to know how knives are used. You need to know how kitchens operate. You need to know how sauces are made. Otherwise, you can't possibly critique one that fails. Same thing with a smartphone. You need to know how it's manufactured, how it's designed, what an app is, how these things work, what Objective-C is. Not so that you can go off and do it yourself. I would never eat a meal cooked by a restaurant critic or run a programme written by a journalist, but so that you can understand it, you can go deep enough in your understanding of it to be able to be sure of the answers you're being given and of the way you're presenting it. Make sure you actually find it interesting. Okay, so read a lot of other people's stuff, and if it starts to bore you, this is not for you, okay? Because there is a lot of it and there's a lot of detail. So that's the first thing. Try yourself out on it. Decide whether you actually like the stuff that's out there. Second thing would be to accept that you're going to have to stay up to date. So it never ends. Because it moves so fast, you have to constantly keep moving. You can't establish an expertise and then just bank it like credit in the bank. It doesn't work like that. Every day you wake up, you have to learn new stuff. And unless that's the way you like doing things, you'll find this really challenging. And then the third thing would be, as with everyone, start doing it and see if it works for you. So if you think you might want to review tech products, review some tech products. If you think you might want to start writing about the social implications of cloud computing or the Internet of Things, then figure out what they are and write something about it and just see if it works for you.